We're
unmute.
John Lane, could you just turn your video off until you're called upon to speak? Thank you.
good. We're good. Check and check. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I now call the Planning Committee to order for October 20th, 2020. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and archived on the city's website. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. And please refrain from moving furniture, construction, or airplanes during the meeting. Members of the committee, please use the hand talk sign if you need to speak between items and raise a hand to move or second an item. I'll now go through roll call for today's meeting. Councillor Farr, not present currently. Who's still moving furniture?
Not me.
Councillor Johnson.
Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Wilson.
Good morning, President.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson. I saw Councillor Ferguson. Oh, empty frame. And we also have Councillors Clark and Nan joining us this morning. Welcome to the ever amusing Planning Committee. And welcome back for Councillor Clark. Second week in a row. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are changes under public hearing 7.2, which are applications for UHOPA and zoning bylaw amendments for 1912 Rymel Road East. We have an added written submission from Tony and Shannon Porcaro. For item 7.3, applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 8475 English Church Road East. We have added written submissions from Kunal Kanani and Sonia Pronek. Under 7.4, Urban Hen Backyard Pilot Program written delegations. There's an added written delegation from Maria Muley. And we also have an added notice of motion, 11.1, demolition permit for 1355, 1359, and 1375 Upper James Street, and 1624, 34, 40, and 48 Stone Church Road East.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Councillor Ferguson's picture frame is empty. Thank you, that's carried. On to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none. On to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting for October 6, 2020. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, can you just vote on the approval of the minutes?
She's got me signed in. Madam Clerk, if you sign me in, because it's coming up on the default.
Oh, yep, I've added you back to the roll call, but I can just take this vote for you.
Okay.
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, communications, we have 4.1 from Ahmad David respecting taxi drivers and licensing. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence. Moved by Councillor Partridge.
Can I do a point of order, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly. Yep.
I just wanted to declare a conflict on this one. It involves the taxi industry where I'm an investor.
Thank you. So you just select, it's not.
Yeah, I'll select the abstain.
Abstain, yeah. Okay, so moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor of receiving the correspondence? With the recognizing Councillor Ferguson's conflict. We got everybody? Thank you. For today, we have delegation request from Mike Bozo respecting the Urban Hen Backyard Pilot Program. Need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation request for today's meeting. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Yep. Oh, thank you. This is to be heard for today's meeting following item 7.1. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. And we're going to move on to the consent items. Just remind members of staff who are speaking at today's meeting if they could state their name and title before speaking for the first time, as we have some guests with us on today's meeting. The first item is 6.1, item to incorporate lands into Arvin Avenue, bylaw PED 20157 in Ward 10. Need a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Is there any discussion on 6.1? Seeing none? All in favor? Thank you. That carries. 6.2 is item to incorporate city lands into North Waterdown Drive, bylaw PED 20166 in Ward 15. Need a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Any discussion on 6.2? Nope. Seeing none. All in favor? Thank you. 6.3 is an appeal of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment application UHOPA-19-008 and zoning bylaw amendment application ZAC 19-029 to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal for lack of decision for lands located at 77, 83, 89 Stone Church Road West and 1029 West 5th in Hamilton in Ward 8. I would like to see the staff presentation. I believe that James is on the line. So James, if you're available.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Councillor Chairman, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Can you see me? Yep. Perfect. So, as stated before, my name is James Van Roy. I'm a planner with the Planning and Economic Development Division. I'm here to discuss today PED 20171, which is an information report regarding the appeal for Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment applications for lands located at 73, 77, 83, 89 Stone Church Road West and 1029 West 5th Street in Hamilton. So as you can see here, we have the lands. The lands are located at the southeast corner of Stone Church Road West and West 5th Street. We're looking at a change in zoning from the Urban Protected Residential District C and the Agricultural District to the multiple dwelling district with a site-specific exemption. Here we have an aerial of the lands. So to the north
Sorry,
we have.
James, were you sharing your screen? Because I'm not seeing your screen.
Oh, my apologies. Okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
My apologies, Counselor. It's been some time since I've been in this environment. So I'm just going to go skip ahead to the location here. So here you can see we have the lands at the southeast corner of Stone Church Road West and West 5th Street. The lands are zoned C, Urban Protected Residential District, and AA, Agricultural District, and DE2 with a site-specific multiple dwelling district. And the applicant is looking at rezoning the entire property to DE2 site-specific multiple dwelling district. So here is an aerial photo of the lands. We have, to the north, we have townhouses. To the east of the lands, we have a institutional use. To the west, we have townhouses, and to the south, we have a vacant parcel, but it's now a parcel that's under construction for a 4-story retirement home. This was the subject proposal. What we're looking at here is this was a proposal for 237 units. The applicant came in for a third submission with a proposal for 216 units. They reduced a bit of the parking to 54 spaces, and they also have 213 underground parking spaces. This proposal in total would be 309 units per hectare. So the official plan amendment, the intent of that official plan amendment is to increase the units per hectare from in a high density neighborhoods district to from 100 to 200 units per hectare to 309 units per hectare. Just to give you a bit of context for the site, this is, if you're looking at the site at the intersection of Stone Church Road West and West 5th, if you're looking southeast, there's the site before you. Here we have 73 and 77 Stone Church Road, which make up some of that site. This is the neighboring property, St. Mary's Assyrian Church, to the east of the site. This is if you were looking north from the site, we have the neighboring townhouse dwelling units. Moving further west along Stone Church Road West, we have the single attached dwelling units. We also have single attached dwelling units further along West 5th Street. This is 1029 West 5th Street. It makes up the subject site. Here we have that 4-story retirement home, which was that vacant parcel in the earlier photo of the aerial. And here is across the street, you're looking at 1030 West 5th Street, which are the townhouses to the west of the site. And here we have just a view of Stone Church Road West looking east. You can see just a bit further in the distance, not the immediate set of lights, but the next set of lights would be Upper James Street. And here we have Stone Church Road looking west. This is West 5th Street as if you're looking south. And here we have West 5th Street looking in a north direction. So this application has been circulated or was circulated to within 120 meters to property owners. This application was circulated to property owners within 120 meters of the subject site in accordance with the Planning Act. A sign was also placed on the property. And on September 19th, the applicant hosted an open house regarding this proposal. As part of the application review prior to the appeal, we received 47 written submissions from the surrounding residents, as well as a petition signed by 76 residents. The concerns range from traffic, parking, notification procedures, overdevelopment, servicing capacity, construction, tenure, community benefit, and compatibility. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. We'll open up the floor to committee if there's any questions, and then I have a couple questions as well myself. Can you just close your presentations there, James?
Yep.
Have anybody on the speakers list? I saw Councillor Ferguson hand up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Who's the owner?
The owner is Villery Construction.
Oh, okay. And there seems to be a pattern happening here where certain consultants are just jumping everything directly to LPAT. And is probably a better question for Steve. Is this something we need to be concerned about?
It is always, through the chair to the councillor, it's always a concern when applicants, when we think we're working with applicants and they just want to go straight to the LPAT and bypass the public participation process and allow for community input. I think that's why we're working very hard to bring these applications forward. If we know that we're simply not going to be in a position where we can recommend approval, that we bring this forward to planning committee as quickly as possible with a denial recommendation, so that the city's case is strongest, we put forward the strongest possible case at the LPAT hearing. So, I think one of the other factors is at the formal consultation stage, we are trying to flag these projects where we know that simply that we, as much as we provide them with that information that they need to when they submit their application, to advise them, staff don't feel that they would be in a position to support the application, so it does not come as a surprise to them if we bring the application forward with a denial recommendation.
So this would be a denial recommendation then, would it?
Had it not been appealed to the LPAT, and staff would have probably been coming forward with the denial recommendation, and I think that's what transpired with this particular case. Staff had been having conversations with the applicant, and it was after the last meeting where staff met with the applicant and their agent that the applicant then subsequently decided to file an appeal for non-decision on this matter.
And maybe if legal is on the line, they may answer this question better than you can, Steve. Does LPAT not take a dim view when they take it directly to them rather than go through the process within the municipality?
Good morning. It's Patrick McDonald from Legal. Thank you. Through the chair, so I don't think the LPAT treats applications any differently regarding whether they've been a non-decision or arising from council decision. There's a statutory test under the Planning Act. They'd have to file in either case, and under Bill 108, as it's now a de novo hearing, so meaning it doesn't look directly to council's decision like Bill 139 did. There's no real difference in how they're treated at that point.
Okay, because I have a similar one in Ancaster, same owner, same consultant, threatening to go off to LPAT now. And so I'm just curious to know, is this a pattern that's starting to develop? Is it exclusive to one consultant or one owner? Or is it system-wide because it can be more successful with the board? What's your thoughts on that, Patrick?
As for whether the application would be more successful, I can't speak on that broadly. Depends on the individual application. But certainly if an applicant wants to speed up the process rather than wait for a council decision, they can use non-decision to that effect to get in front of LPAT faster than waiting for an appeal from a council decision.
So I guess you'll be the lawyer vigorously defending this then before LPAT?
Through the chair, I don't know if I specifically would be the person, but depending on our standing instructions, someone from legal would be.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions from committee? Not seeing any. A couple questions from me, as this is in Ward 8, and this is an application that I've been working on for quite some time. We've had a number of meetings with staff, with the developer, with Villery, with residents on this specific application. And to you, James, the original proposal for this site was stacked townhomes, correct? That was what was originally envisioned for this corner?
Through you, Chair, that is correct.
So we went from a proposal for stacked townhomes, which more or less meets the neighborhood. We have townhomes on two sides. Now, there is the 4-story institutional development, which is right next door to this this site. So it does make sense for higher density at this corner. with a 4-store development right next door. So to you, James, just remind me again, what is the density that they are proposing with their current development versus what would be staff's preference for that site?
So through you, Chair, the current proposal as it came in with their last iteration was at 309 units per hectare. The initial application that they filed was 339 units per hectare. The surrounding uses, for example, the institutional use to the south, we have a density of 114 units per hectare. And the lands, the townhouses that we see, the typical form of development in that area is around 43 units per hectare.
Thank you. So just again, to put this into context for committee and for the public, is that again, it's surrounded by townhomes. There's a four-story institutional build next door. On Upper James, which is kind of the next block over, we have C5 zoning, which limits construction to 6 stories. And all of a sudden, we're facing this development proposal for a 10-story with densities that are double what we would consider appropriate for the neighborhood. So through to you, James, the non-decision. I just want to make clear with myself and with anybody that may be watching this, what does that non-decision mean? What was the process that led up to that?
So through you, Chair, basically the non-decision was filed because we have failed to make a decision on the application within 120 days of that application being deemed complete. So what has transpired is they have appealed because of that lapse in time. We were working with the applicant to try to get a development that was more sympathetic to the surrounding area. However, I think as those discussions transpired, it was clear that we were both just on different sides of the fence. So they have appealed it. That appeal notice is circulated to landowners within the 120-meter circulation. So they are made aware that there will be a LPAT hearing. And that's kind of the process that we're in right now.
Thank you. And just when you say that we as the city failed to reach a decision, it kind of makes it sound like we didn't do something right or that it's our fault that this is being appealed, where in fact we were working with Valeri in good faith, trying to come towards a solution that could be supported by planning staff, that could be supported by this committee. And they basically, by working in good faith with them, that is why we went past the non-decision deadline, because we are trying to continue to work to a solution. And as Council Ferguson pointed out, I think what happened in this case is that they saw that they're going to be denied, and instead of actually seeing that process through to the end in good faith as the city was working with them, they just jumped straight to LPAT. And it's really disappointing for me as the ward councillor, and I know it's definitely very disappointing for the residents who participated in this process in good faith, to put their voices out there and to voice their concerns with this, and they don't receive the same consideration at LPAT, and it's really unfair to the residents in the neighborhood. So with that, I guess I didn't give up the chair, did I? I will continue then. So I need a, where are we here? Mover and a seconder to receive the report. So Councillor Fergus, staff presentation. Okay, moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by myself to receive the staff presentation. All in favor? Councillor Partridge? Do we need to receive the report? Yes. Okay. So mover and seconder to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? Thank you. We're good? Yep. On to 6.4. which is an appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal for lack of decision on Urban Hamilton Official Plan Amendment UHOPA 17-006 and zoning application ZAC 17-016 for lands located at 909 North Waterdown Drive in Flamborough, PED 2167 in Ward 15. Discussion on 6.4, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For whatever reason, the speaker button is not working. I really don't want to make any comments at this point, but I'll just receive the presentation. So I'll move to receive it. Actually, the information report, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Pearson to receive the report. All in favor, unless there's any further discussion? Seeing none. Thank you. Item 6.5 is the new generation 911 requirements respecting duplicate street names and municipal addressing issues. PED 20175 in wards 1, 2, 12, 13, and 15. Does committee wish to see the staff presentation on this? Councillor Wilson, yes? Okay. So we have Alvin Chan available for the staff presentation.
Good morning. Just trying to share.
Good morning, Alvin.
Minimize that. So good morning. I'm here to present the new generation 911 requirements, in particular to address duplicate street names and municipal addressing issues that have arisen out of the new program. So on June 1st of 2017, sorry, just move this out of the way. The CRTC directed all telephone companies and networks to upgrade for the new next generation 911. Voice and text messaging services are to come in the future. Currently, the City of Hamilton has a public emergency response service provider being Bell Canada, to which we have an agreement from the regional days, but obligates us to provide Bell Canada with accurate addressing information for 911 purposes. How do we switch to the next slide? So what does this mean for the City of Hamilton? Bell Canada did their review under the new guidelines from the CRTC, and I've identified 3 categories of issues. The first being overlap, the second being duplicate, and the last being mixed parity. And I'll try and give examples. So the overlap was identified in Ward 12 in Ancaster, being Woodworth Drive. In this particular issue is that there are several segments of the street with the same address ranges that are overlapping. So we have to correct that. This will require a street name change for its resolution. Staff's recommendation, although not being presented today, is the use of an east-west suffix at Elgin Place, and this should solve the issue. This issue is a historical issue. It's an older part of Ancaster where the numbers were set, and something we've been living with, but unfortunately is not permissible under the new generation 911. So the second set is probably a more contentious one. These are duplicates. These are 2 different streets within the same former municipality that share the same name, suffix, direction, and ranges. So in particular, 4 streets were identified: Bayview Avenue in Flamborough, being wards 13 and 15. Margaret Street in Flamborough, being ward 12 and 15. William Street in Flamborough, ward 13 and 15. And Union Street in Flamborough, ward 12 and 15. In order to resolve this, one of the 2 duplicate streets will need to be changed. The last set of issues is identified as mixed parity, where a street segment has odd or even address ranges on both sides. I know this may sound counterintuitive, but a good example would be a court. So when you come into a kind of a cul-de-sac, you may have even on the right side of the cul-de-sac and odd on the left side of the cul-de-sac, just for fire and other purposes. Under that, they've identified 4 streets of concern: Buchanan Court in Ward 15, East Street South in Ward 13, Valley Inn Road in Ward 1, and Ferguson Avenue North in Ward 2. In staff's preliminary review, we believe 2 of these can be easily solved with IT solutions, so some coding. However, 2 properties will require address changes. The good thing to note is that the 2 properties in question, one is owned by the Hamilton Conservation Authority, and the other is actually a city property. So we do not perceive any issues with this. And we have reached out to the Conservation Authority ahead of time, and they have no concerns with the potential change should council or should this committee approve the recommendations today. So that concludes my presentation. More than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alvin. And I have Councillor Pearson on the speakers list. Councillor Pearson. I see you, Councillor Partridge. We'll add you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alvin, for the overview. So, Alvin, for the residents that have to change their street name or numbers, what does it entail specifically? I mean, is this just for EMS or 911 requirements, or are they going to have to do a change that has to be registered on title and all their documents have to be changed, etc., like ID, etc.?
Yes, through the chair to the councillor, yes, you would have to update your personal information. In our view, most of the information typically or programs you can update with no cost. We do note, when you're renewing your mortgage, that's the time to update your legal description with the bank. So we don't perceive any major costs associated. There obviously may be some services that a resident may be using that incurs a cost for change of address in this case. With respect to Canada Post, though, we have confirmed in discussions with them there will be no cost to homeowner for the change in mail service. They will take that upon themselves in their operations. The only other costs we perceive is potentially the physical municipal numbers. A steel number attached to a building, or the latex on a glass window, things of that nature. That being said, our intention is to simply change the street name and not the municipal number. So technically speaking, the physical number should suffice. They might have to change the street name that follows it, perhaps. But we're trying to minimize as best we can the impacts to any homeowners.
Okay, so you mentioned that when they renew a mortgage, etc. So what if somebody was to sell their home? How would they know when they do the title search at the registry office the name that they're changing to?
Correct. So if the street is changed, we obviously will pass a bylaw and those residents would be notified. It'd be their discretion as to when they would decide to update the information. So if resident was in that predicament, I would obviously recommend they update it immediately for the purpose of the sale. But there are opportunities to update without cost, I guess, is what we're implying. And we just can't predict every resident's concerns and issues.
But we wouldn't put something on title that identifies that the change has been made so that a lawyer catches that? I guess because of technology, I'm more concerned that something's going to slip through the cracks.
Well, the notice is provided to MPAC and everyone else, so MPAC will do their due diligence on their end, as well as the utilities, things of that nature, on our address notification when we do that. But your specific personal documents, the resident may still have to undertake that themselves, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have Councillor Partridge, followed by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And so I'm just curious, why couldn't they just use the Canada Post postal codes? Because the postal codes are different for each street that's on this list.
Understandably so, Councillor. Oh, sorry, through you, Chair, to the Councillor. Understandably so. Unfortunately, the way the public emergency response service works with Bell, it doesn't use postal codes because it's not something they manage. So they don't really have control per se. The future is going to go towards an XY coordinate is where they want to go with this. So if you were to provide, as I mentioned earlier, voice or text over a cell phone, they'll be able to trace you to that particular location. So that's why they want individual addresses, unfortunately. Historically, we were okay by using some minor descriptors to decipher, but unfortunately under this new system, they don't go past the former municipality. And so once they see 2 Bayviews in Flamborough, that's when it becomes a concern now under this new program.
Okay, thank you. And did I hear you say there's no time limit for residents to make the change and no time limit from Bell for us to make this change?
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, according to the CRTC, we do have some time to make the necessary changes. The issue at hand right now, as I understand it, and I believe corporate services will be bringing forth a report on Thursday to AFNA on the new generation 911. Part of the issue at hand for us is that Bell, being our PERS provider, is not willing to extend the current agreement without resolution of this matter because they just want to get ahead of the game and, in essence, be compliant with CRTC regulations as soon as possible. So we're a bit of a catch-22 in the sense that they are using that particular agreement as leverage. And I'm sure corporate services, I believe Mr. Zagaric is bringing a report on Thursday who may be able to speak to more specifics to that end.
So in terms of timing, though, is that coming in the report? Is that not information you have today?
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, timing for what in particular?
Well, my question was, is there no time limit to make this change? What I'm hearing is that, yes, there may be, but I'm not hearing what that time limit is. What is the timing around this when the change has to be made?
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, my understanding, and again, it should be better clarified in the report on Thursday, but my understanding is CRTC has given us until, I believe, 2023 to clean up all these issues. But it's Bell who's holding us to a tighter timeline.
And how many homeowners are affected by this?
So through the Chair to the Councillor, per the report, we are not recommending any changes at this time. We wish to consult with you, the Ward Councillor, obviously, as well as the residents.
Right.
Generally speaking, staff's recommendation obviously would be to pick the street with the least number of properties to have the least amount of impact. And including, as I mentioned off the top, with respect to Woodward Street using east-west suffix, we anticipate approximately 80 properties would be impacted. Just
on that one street?
No, in total. So the 4 duplicate streets in Woodworth, and the 2 public properties to have municipal address changes. So totaling all the requirements of Bell, we anticipate about 80 properties.
About 80. Okay, thank you, Alvin. And what names are being proposed for at this point, or is that something you're going to work on with each individual councillor?
Through the Chair to the Councillor, that's absolutely correct. We want to work with you to pick a name that would be suitable for yourself as well as your residents. So no names have been chosen. Obviously, there are some rules and policies, but otherwise, as long as it meets our guidelines, there's no issues.
Thank you, Alvin. And through you, Chair, as I'm just looking at the list where there's duplicates between 13, 15, and 12 and 15, and I'm just wondering, taking William Street as an example, could we not incorporate, the name Dundas, William Dundas Street, or William Waterdown Street, or something like that? So you're not really changing the name of the street, but you're incorporating the area within it.
Through the chair to the councillor, as long as the official street name is changed, there would be no issue, as long as it's not a duplicate within the same former municipality, and I'm not aware of any duplicate with the two you recommended.
Okay, and I just, I don't want to minimize the impact this is going to have on residency. It's huge. It's not just about changing the address for a mortgage, but it's absolutely everything. I mean, just think about your own personal lives. And all of the documentation that you have that would have your address on it. It's absolutely incredible how many pieces of paper this would require, and the effort and the time, and it all falls on the resident. I don't get the sense that the city is actually going to be assisting the resident with any of this. Is that accurate, Alvin?
Through the chair to the councillor, that is correct. There is no funding from the feds or anything like that as a result of this program. As I mentioned, we had fought up until this point to keep the street names that we did have, but unfortunately this new program just doesn't allow it, and we do need to be compliant. So yes, it is a cost to the residents. As I mentioned, hopefully most of the services don't charge, but there may be some that will incur costs. That is correct. Okay,
thank you, Alvin. I appreciate your answers, and Chair, I look forward to working with staff, because I'm hoping that within the names that are here, we're able to not just add an east or a west, but certainly I think ours in wards 12, 13, and 14 are perhaps a little more complex. And even wards 1 and 2, that we will be able to look for names that, can perhaps put an addition of something into it. Anyway, those are my comments, my questions. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to go back and start with the first one that was put up here. And my computer just jumped on me, but it's Woodworth Drive in Ancaster, and that's been a dog's breakfast for a long time. Yeah, the street numbers jump all over the place. It'll start at 14, go up to 20, back down to 10, up to 35, and it drives the poor pizza delivery guys crazy. And I'm trying to find a home because they're not in numerical order. Ambulances, I did get complaints from my constituents that ambulances can't find it either. The GPS just keeps telling them that it's recalculating because I can't find the numbers because they're not in numerical order. But Alvin, you say you're not going to adjust the numbers. And so how will fire and ambulance be able to find these homes if the numbers aren't corrected?
So through the chair to the councillor, in our preliminary review, it appears that if we were to use Elgin Place as a dividing road, the number ranges do make sense, and there wouldn't be an issue to our understanding.
Okay, I don't believe that's correct, but I'd be happy to. It's just Woodworth coming up here now.
Hang on a sec, Councillor. Is this?
Through the chair, that's not me sharing. I'm not sure who that is.
That's Ed Fothergill that's sharing that, and it's for 7.3, I think.
Ed, could you stop sharing your screen, please? Can we stop sharing a screen? Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to have a conversation with you. You say you're going to meet with every ward councillor to make sure we're going to get, if we're going to make this change, we got to make it right. I did put a referendum out because I had so many people complain about me at their regular numbers. I did put a referendum out from my office to every home in Woodworth Avenue. And
Ed.
On Woodworth Avenue, and the referendum came back overwhelmingly to leave it alone. And to that me sends a message, this will be controversial when we start changing street names. And if it's simply going east to west, it probably won't be bad. But I would like to just review with you, Ed, Alvin, the Woodward Avenue one, and make sure that if there is a numerical dog's breakfast, that we try to fix that through this process. And on, I didn't know Judy and I touched, our wards touched Union Street in Flamborough. Is that Union Street in Jerseyville?
Bear with me, Councillor. I'm just going to look that up for you. Through the chair to the councillor, so the Union Street that is in your ward is within Linden.
Oh, so there's more. There's a Union Street in Linden and in Waterdown, then, is there?
Correct. So the Councillor Partridge's is within Waterdown.
Because I believe there's also a Union Street in Jerseyville. It gets nicknamed Back Street, but I believe it's called Union. But I'd like to have, if you're going to come around, we can talk about that. I don't need to waste the committee's time on this. But I just wanted to find out where that is. And the same as Margaret Street. There's one in Flamborough and one in Waterdown then, is there?
Through the chair, with respect to Margaret Street, it is the first one in your ward, councillor, is in Linden, and the one in Councillor Partridge's is in Waterdown as well.
Okay. The screen's jumping all over the place here again.
Ed, you're sharing your screen again.
I'll keep going.
Yeah,
and so, well, what's up here now?
Now I'm reading his email.
Yeah, put that back up, will you? and my last question, Alvin, is I'm surprised Mohawk Road isn't a problem when there's Mohawk Road in Hamilton that starts where Golf Links Road ends, and there's Mohawk Road in Ancaster between 403 and the Ancaster Creek, and at Ancaster Creek it changes to Russo.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, we are aware of those. We push back that the former municipalities should still be utilized. Otherwise, we'd have to change King Street, Queen Street, all those big roads. So as long as the road is not duplicated in the same former municipality. So in the case you provided, there's Mohawk in Hamilton, then there's Mohawk in Ancaster. So they are, for all intents and purposes, distinct. Or unique.
Is this an opportunity to fix the fact that it's Mohawk Road up as far as Ancaster Creek, then it switches to Russo to make it all Russo? Is this an opportunity to do that?
Through the chair to the councillor, our recommendation is with respect to addressing the bell requirements, but there is no reason why you could not expand to include other roadways that aren't of issue, but that you wish to address. I would probably recommend that they be kept as two separate projects, just so that we can ensure compliance with CRTC with respect to the ones that are identified by Bell, and then any that are of the wish list of the council, of course.
Okay, so Linden and Waterdown aren't two distinctive locations then?
Unfortunately not, councillor. So we were, through the chair to the councillor, we were previously allowed to use those identifiers, Linden, Waterdown. Under this new generation 911, they have eliminated that column and they will not accept that. So now we're left in this predicament where we do have to rectify those streets that they've identified.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chair. So I look forward, Alvin, to you coming to meet me about this, and we can go through it in detail.
Through the chair, yes, we will definitely be consulting.
Thank you. Any further questions to Alvin on this item? Not seeing any. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the staff presentation. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Wilson. To receive the presentation. All in favor? And then Councillor Farr, your vote. Thumbs up from Councillor Farr. Thank you, that carries. And then I need a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you. On to, where are we here? Public hearings and delegations. Item 7.1 is Heather Bond respecting changes to the urban hen bylaw approved at the October 6th meeting.
So this is Lisa Kelsey, just advising, I have heard recently from Heather that she was having some challenges getting into the meeting. So what I am suggesting is that we maybe go ahead to Mike Bozzo and then just to give Heather a bit of time to get into the meeting.
Okay. Mike Bozzo, if you're on the in the meeting, you can activate your camera and your mic.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you have the floor, sir?
Pardon me?
You have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, all committee members, and especially Councillor Nan for bringing this motion up today. I appreciate it. This is not my first time requesting for urban hens, so I'm grateful for this opportunity. And I'd like to share some information. I know there are some concerns, and there's been some councillor members that were not in favor, and I never really got a reason why, but I'm thinking it's noise and disturbance to neighbors, as well as smell. So I want to address some of these issues, but I also want to address that during this pandemic and this COVID time, a very important time to bring in this pilot, because I know for seniors who have been hit the most during this pandemic, they're inside, stuck inside. I see it with my parents. They were used to socializing every night at one of our rec centers close by, and they've been stuck inside along with all my friends' parents and aunts, and they would love to have backyard hens. So there's many reasons and benefits: mental health, environment, self-sustainability, where you got fresh eggs. But for the seniors, also all the people working from home, this is a great outlet for them. I mean, there's only so many things and only so much time you can spend on your computer or on your iPhone. It gets people outside in the backyard. Students who have decided to work from home. I know my nephews during when the COVID started were stuck at home, and the parents were fit to be tied because those poor boys had nothing to do but stay on their iPads and television, couldn't play with their friends. It would have been a great project for them to build a coop, set up a coop in their backyard, and learn to take care of these backyard hens. So as far as smell and noise goes, years ago when my son outgrew his backyard playhouse, it was a tree fort, I decided to transform it into a chicken coop. It all set up, and and over time I had set it up and come up with a final solution that you could hardly hear any noise at all, because they now produce these chickens. They're hybrid. It's a hybrid cross of chickens called ISA chickens, and you can get them at Load and Supply, which is just on the outskirts of Hamilton. And these chickens are very docile and very quiet. If you get a minute sound out of these chickens, you're lucky, because they're just bred like that. So that eliminates the noise problem. Also, the only time chickens will cluck as well is if they're scared. So when you build your chicken coop and you put walls about 3 feet high in the run, they won't see squirrels coming by or any sort of predator that you may have in your backyard, and they won't get spooked. So that worked for me, and I never got one single complaint from a neighbor. And this is Ward 7, where my backyard backs onto townhouses. So I have many residents behind me, and of course my neighbors to the side of me, and not one complaint during that time. So the noise should not be an issue if people follow the regulations. As far as smell goes, if you have 30 hens in your backyard, you're going to get smell and odor. If you have 4 to 6, and you clean your coop out on a monthly basis, you will have no smell. And the run, you have to have hay or straw there, and you clean it out regularly, absolutely no smell, never one complaint. Apart from that, cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Moncton, Ottawa, these are major cities in our country, have pockets and pilots of backyard hens. Toronto has four pockets where they have backyard hens. So I would love to see Hamilton join that list, especially for the, like I say, the mental health reasons. Environment, they're great for the environment. They're the best natural fertilizers, excellent to add to your compost. They've been proven as therapeutic animals. My daughter is a major at the University of Minnesota in child psychology. She's doing her master's there, and they have done studies and research on the benefits for people who suffer from dementia and autism, and the benefits of backyard hens for them. What else can I say? They're inexpensive. We all know how expensive it is to have a dog, and bringing them to a veterinarian. Backyard hens, if there's only 4 to 6 of them, they don't get sick, okay? So the costs are excellent as far as people who can't afford a dog or a cat like that.
Mike, I'm just going to interrupt you. You're just past your 5
Sorry.
minutes.
Yeah.
But have any wrap-up final thoughts? Please go ahead.
Any concerns, please let me know, and if I can answer them, I would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions for Mike from committee? I'm not seeing any. Nobody on the speakers list? Nope. Okay, thank you, Mike. Was Heather able to join?
I'm here on the phone, if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you, Heather.
Hi, how are you? And I'm sorry that I can't log in. I keep trying, and it's just not working for me.
Just hang on.
Speak now?
Hang on 1 second, Heather. We're just going to receive Mike's delegation, and then we'll come to you. So motion to receive Mike's delegation, moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Thank you. And Heather, I should have let Mike know before his presentation, but you have 5 minutes for your delegation, and you have the floor. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, I'm Heather Bond. I'm the girl in Hamilton who was featured in the Hamilton Spectator for having bylaw called on her, myself, for owning the 4 urban hens. If anyone wants to look into the bylaw complaint, it had nothing to do with noise or smell. Unfortunately, it was from an acquaintance that just knew I was not abiding by the law and wanted to get me in trouble. I've had my hens for 3.5 years. I've actually had 2 different batches of hens. And all my neighbors beside me and behind me were aware of this. During the COVID pandemic, I was actually sharing my eggs with them because they were too afraid to go to the grocery stores. And then the cost of food went up, and it continues to still go up, which is outrageous. I'm a single mother. I have 2 part-time jobs, and it's just hard with rent and everything else. So I feel that it is a good pilot program to have in the city. Like I said, my coop was featured in the Hamilton Spectator. It's a gorgeous coop. I had Narinder Dan come here and come in my backyard. I've invited other counselors to come, but I didn't receive anything. I do have chronic Lyme disease. That is why I got my chickens, because they ate the ticks that were in my backyard. And so far, I've had no ticks on my dogs or myself since I've owned them. I'm living proof that you can keep a hen house clean. I clean mine every bi-weekly which why there's no like sound or scent or anything or bad smells. The other thing is, I think it should just be restricted to 4 hens, clearly no roosters. Other pilot programs that go on around us, they've all succeeded and have had no complaints at all, including Toronto. That's basically all I have to say, and hopefully it gets approved because we're so far behind with everyone else. I just like to see it go through because I eat organic eggs and it's so expensive in the grocery stores to actually buy organic free-range eggs now. I don't know what else to say. I still have my girls and I keep getting fined, but I'm trying to change the bylaw here. It's a good thing for me and my son. It keeps him busy, especially now because he's being homeschooled. And during his breaks, he still goes out and collects the eggs. And I'd just like to see a motion changed, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
That's all. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I do have a few questions for you. Councillor Nan, Councillor Nan, followed by Councillor Pearson and Councillor Farr. Councillor Nan?
Thank you, and double thank you as a non-committee member for the opportunity to engage on this issue. Heather, thanks so much for coming in this morning and sharing your delegation. And I think sharing your delegation and submissions over the course of the entire year. It's residents like you in Ward 3 who are the reason that I was able to put this motion together with the support of this committee members being able to put it forward for me here, as it's the appropriate place for bylaw consideration. So Heather, thanks again also for inviting me to come check it out. It's often difficult to make decisions without having the practical opportunity to be in somebody's backyard and experience what urban hen management looks like at its best. And I have to say, your chicken coop is the Cadillac of the coops that I've had a chance to see before. And so I thank you for inviting me to your backyard, safely distanced, to observe that this year. Heather, you mentioned that you haven't had any complaints from neighbors, and you've had the hens for 3.5 years.
Correct.
And of your neighbors, do you have a lot of? Do you share your fence line with many neighbors, and how many?
1, 2, 3 neighbors, 2 beside me and 1 on the back.
Yep.
And none of them have complained. The other issue I forgot to bring forward is when I put my petition around the city, which I have close to 1,500 signatures already, I found out then there's a lot of people in Hamilton that reached out to me that are already raising urban hens. And so right away a red flag went up to me and thought, at least if they pass the bylaw, they can control how the hens are raised and housed and make sure everything's to proper standards and, you know, that they're not just thrown in cages in a backyard or a box or... So it's something that's already going on, and I just think the city needs to control the people that are doing it and just haven't been caught.
Thank you. That's a valuable point. Did you say, sorry, I just wanted to circle back. You shared that you had a citywide petition that you've been circulating?
Yes.
And what's the nature of the petition?
It was to try to change the urban hen bylaw, and it was giving the story on my son and I, how we've been doing it and raising them.
Thank you. And that's 1,500 signatures. Did I hear that right?
I believe I have to count is 1,487, almost 1,500.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are my questions for you. Thank you again for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Heather. Thank you for the information. So I appreciate Councillor Nan's previous question. So you've had the chickens now, you have 4, you've had them for 3.5 years. So I'm going to ask a question.
3.5 years, yes.
Yeah. So what do you do with them once they no longer are laying?
They are still laying.
Okay, but once they, so I'm not sure the time period, how long they lay, because I know that lessens over the years.
They can lay up to like 7 years. The only thing is they just slow down, just like they slow down in the winter, unless I put a light out there that's on for longer than 10 hours. Because they need 10 hours of daylight to lay eggs.
Okay. So you haven't had to, you're not aware of what anyone does once they're past the laying stage?
No, but when it comes to me, if they were past the laying stage, I would keep 2 as pets still because I've had them since chicks. And then I would find a farm in a rural community, like a hobby farm, that wanted them as pets.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you for that. That's what I wanted to just ask. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Heather, for joining us and sharing your firsthand experience. You may be aware, if you did a little bit of research on a couple of past efforts for urban hens in the Hammer, I was trying to lead the charge, so I'm still supportive today. I think you'll be happy to hear.
Well, that's very good.
One of the things I emphasized the last kick at this, unsuccessful unfortunately, was that every area municipality has allowed this. The take-up is minuscule because it is a bit of work, and the bylaws around enforcement in every other municipality are strict, which is, to my question through you, Mr. Chair, probably why as you have reported, there are no complaints. Is it because the enforcement and the bylaws around urban hens in your research in every other neighboring community that does allow this, we're the only that doesn't, has a good firm plan associated to this?
Are you asking me or the gentleman?
Did you research the bylaws, Heather, in the other communities?
Oh, yeah, sorry. When I did research the other bylaws, one of the main reasons that I assumed, like from reading everything, why there isn't complaints is because I think people are on the false pretense that if they pass a bylaw, that means every house on the street is going to go out and get chickens. Well, what happens is they pick like a designated number in different wards. 10 people in Ward 3, 5 people in Ward 8, say. And so they're scattered and far between. And I believe that's why I feel that the people who do choose to have the chickens and raise them and do them properly, they're all for it. And that's why there's no complaints. Because they're taking care of the animals. It's like having a dog or a cat. It's a commitment. You have to take care of it all the time. You have to clean it out. You gotta, always be on top of everything, or you will get complaints. From my experience of just researching, I just feel that there was no complaints because people in the area knew that these other people had hens, and they were taking care of everything.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Chair, one last question, Heather. And again, I appreciate your delegation. And you had mentioned that there are no complaints in any other area municipality. Last I checked, which was some 2 years ago, maybe or more, there were limited, very few, maybe 2 in one community or 4 in Niagara, I think there was. Is that definitive? Where did you get that information? Yeah, you said there's no complaints anywhere, even Toronto.
I phoned Toronto, I'm going to say 2 months ago, and they are in their 3rd year of the pilot program, and there's not been one bylaw complaint on noise or smell for anyone that owns the hens.
All right. Thank you.
And that's me phoning.
Yeah, that's very close. The first time I took a run at this in my first term of council, I think lost by 4 votes the second time. So, I'm just going to focus this time on those things that I recall as arguments against. Smell was a big one. Be prepared for that. and sounds like you got that covered with your constant cleaning. Noise was another, and disturbance, those sorts of issues. So I think with
right. Unfortunately, with my circumstance, it was someone who I know who just got mad at me, and they phoned Bylaw and said they didn't know how many chickens I owned, but they were running up and down the street. And the person lives about 10 blocks away, and you guys can verify that with Bylaw. Like, even the Bylaw officer said, I can't believe that's a chicken coop. Like, I can't say nothing about the way you're treating them because your coop is just gorgeous.
Okay. Well, these disputes happen everywhere in the city, whether they're related to chickens or not. So I appreciate it, Heather. I'm gonna really focus on those neighboring communities. They were in existence the last time we took a run at this about 3 or 4 years ago in another term of council, and now the evidence must be even stronger. So I'll be sure to pay attention to this as it heads to ratification, hopefully between now and council. Thank you very much, Heather. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair Danko. Good morning, Heather. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and for sharing your hands-on experience. I just have a few questions about kind of the operations of your coop. So you talked about the support of your neighbors, and you talked about the time that we're in, being COVID, and real issues of food security. Like, what do you do with your eggs? Do you I don't know how many eggs that are generated.
Right now, I'm getting about 3 eggs a day.
3 eggs a day?
My son and I, yes, from my 4 hens. There's 1 hen that has slowed down a little bit.
Just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Are there occasions where you share your eggs with your neighbors, or it's just enough to keep your family going?
They're in the summertime. Some were taking like 2 a day, which is not that common. And then I would share some with my neighbors. Yes, my neighbor's actually a baker for Portland, so she likes to bake a lot at home. And because I have fresh organic and I feed a non-medicated food, so she knows my eggs are organic.
Thank you. So you do share your eggs with your neighbors. You're averaging around 3 eggs a day, perhaps. How do you, in terms of managing your supply, like how do you do that? The incoming eggs.
Like well, I collect them every day. My son does, actually. He collects them every day. And then we eat a lot of omelets, and I like lemon meringue pie, and that uses a lot of eggs.
Yeah, me too.
So I do go through them a lot.
Yes, we're a big pie family in this house. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here this morning, and thank you for phoning in and sticking with the effort to delegate. I appreciate that too, and for the hands-on information you've shared. It's very helpful for me. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions to Heather? Not seeing any. Thank you for the delegation, Heather. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? And then we're going to move up the written correspondence and the motion, if that is okay with committee. Thank you. So if committee would like, we can move up item 7.4, which is the written delegations regarding bourbon hens. And then we can move up the motion as well to hear right now. So Councillor Farr, you want to move that? Seconded by Councillor Johnson. Okay, put that to a vote. All in favor? This is just on the agenda. But I still got to vote up here for the delegation. Councillor Pearson?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to know what I just voted on. But you said it's just to recognize delegation?
We voted to receive the delegation. That
Thank
vote
you.
closed. And then this vote is to move up the
thank you.
The written correspondence and the
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And Councillor Partridge? All right, we got everybody. Okay, so we have, hang on, flip ahead to 7 point, page 20. So 7.4 is the Urban Hens Backyard Pilot Program written delegations. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the written delegations respecting urban hens. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Farr. Is there any discussion on the written delegations? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And then we're going to go to the motion, which is item 10.1, the Urban Hen Backyard Pilot Program. And Councillor Wilson, will you introduce your motion?
Thank you very much, Chair Danko. I'm very, very pleased to move this motion, and I'd like to recognize the work and the advocacy on behalf of my colleague from Ward 3, Councillor Nan. I'm a conduit rather for her, but a proud one at that. I will read the motion. Whereas through the COVID-19 pandemic, it will continue to be crucial for cities to enable food resilience and improve access to inexpensive and nutritious foods close to home. Whereas to reduce negative impacts on the climate, Canadians and Hamiltonians are encouraged to reduce consumption of high carbon and processed foods. Whereas since 2018, at least 8 other Canadian cities, many neighboring Hamilton, have released restrictions on urban hens in favor of urban hen programs, reporting successes. Whereas pilots across the country have resulted in best practices which can be adapted to meet the needs of Hamiltonians interested in raising hens and to address public health and safety concerns, including registration of 4 hens maximum, non-commercial use only, not to be housed in front yards, age of hens, odor and noise assumptions, etc. Whereas the most effective way to mitigate negative effects of urban hen keeping is to regulate it, according to best practices in other municipalities, whereas ticks and associated illnesses continue to be a major health concern and can be mitigated by keeping hens in urban areas, whereas it is suggested that chickens create rich fertilizer which may be composted with yard waste or used to enrich soil. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the appropriate staff be directed to provide the Planning Committee with a pilot Urban Hens program report that integrates 1, a food resilience framework, 2, a review and analysis of best practices and bylaws from the additional municipalities which have permitted urban hens since the initial report keeping of chickens and urban hens was considered by Council in 2012. 3, regulatory considerations which could permit up to a maximum of 10 hen keepers in each wards 1, 2, and 3 as urban wards with a plan for licensing and evaluation that address previously identified issues including but are not limited to health, odor, nuisance, etc. And B, that fines associated with the current bylaw prohibiting the keeping of urban hens be suspended until the report is received. That is the motion. I will be happy to speak to it in time when my time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And your seconder?
I'll second it. Mr. Farr.
Thank you. So discussion on the motion that's on the floor. I'm going to go to committee members first, and then we'll go to anybody else that's in the meeting that wishes to speak to this. So are there any discussion from committee members? I have Councillor Farr on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm seeing around, we'll call it the virtual horseshoe on this particular planning committee in this particular year of 2020 that none of us will ever forget. A number of my colleagues who were part of past backyard hen votes. Some we debated in jest initially. Some of the themes around backyard hens. We got a little more serious the second time around, I think. I've always appreciated the debates. I appreciated hearing from, our rural members, a couple who grew up on farms, who know the downsides from their very own personal experiences. And, I unsuccessfully argued on 2 separate occasions that wouldn't be the case here. A lot of what's before us is basically what we've talked about in the past, but rather succinctly, we're looking at a specific area. If my memory serves, a lot of the folks around the table that maybe had apprehensions in the past were worried about, municipal bylaw complaints related to smells and noise that we talked about earlier and we've talked about in the past in their wards. And what we have here wouldn't affect that because it's specific to wards 1, 2, and 3, where, there's a growing number, undoubtedly, Mr. Chairman, of residents that either A, doesn't affect them, don't see an issue, or B, strongly support 4 or so backyard hens in well-kept coops that are enforced with a new bylaw for municipal bylaw enforcement. So I think this time around, as referenced in 2012, I asked for, and then we received that keeping of backyard hens report. Public health had a lot to do with it. I was a little surprised that public health focused more heavily on the downsides and not the food security issue, which was strongly argued, I think, and mostly more strongly argued by the delegates that were proponents of this in the past than myself, but a very good point. But they did, and I'm wondering this time around, and given the state of things, the environment in 2020, and the better arguments as it relates to, and what I talked about earlier, bylaw not really being an issue in all the neighboring communities. And now to have years of proof of that, which was, I think, the prevailing concern by the nay voters, respectfully, the past 2 times around. So third time, hopefully a charm. I don't think we need to spend an incredible amount of time on this motion. When you read the therefore be it resolves, it's really about, having in this new era, staff set something up that's not citywide, so not impacting most wards, yet still answering a growing call on food security and the opportunities to look after these pets, essentially, in certain areas of our city. So I appreciate the motion. Obviously, a lot of work put into it and a lot of dialogue. And I'm happy to support it as seconder here today and hopefully seeing this finally pass the hurdle, given that most of the concerns have been answered when we get to council and ratification one way or another this coming Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have from committee, I have Councillor Partridge, and then I'll go to Councillor Nan as a non-committee member. Councillor Partridge?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And first of all, I do want to say a lot of effort has been put into this and to bring it forward, specifically for wards 1, 2, and 3. I do appreciate the amount of work put into it and certainly the persistence in bringing this particular item forward to allow urban chickens. I just have a couple of questions for staff. I'm a little bit concerned that we're looking at having a bylaw that is not a bylaw, a pilot project for a live animal. And I'm just wondering through you, Chair, to staff, chickens are considered livestock, I believe, in our bylaws and our animal bylaws. And I'm just wondering if we've ever allowed a pilot project before for live animals or livestock in an urban area.
Ken?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we have not had a pilot project for any live animals, my recollection.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you know, we're not saying, I understand this is for staff to bring back a report with some recommendations, but, you know, how would we, I guess is my question, how would we structure a pilot program around live animals? You know, it's kind of like dogs and cats and saying, well, let's run a program where we'll let people in the wards have 5 dogs or 10 dogs for a period of 6 months to a year. And then if it doesn't work out, what happens to those poor animals? So I'm a little bit concerned. In fact, I'm wondering if even from a legal perspective, and I don't know if there's anybody from legal, but, you know, can we even run a pilot program for a living creature? I'm not sure if there's anybody that can answer that for me, but that's certainly one of the questions that I have.
Ken, are you able to address that?
Unfortunately, I can't. You know, it is considered poultry and livestock, and you know, I think what you're allowing it to do is having it licensed of some sort. We do have pot-belly pigs that are actually licensed, but they're at that point that they're grandfathered. So eventually, there will be no more pot-belly pigs in the city. So I think that's a question that might have to come back if we do a report as a legal opinion.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Chair. I would like to have that legal opinion incorporated. I'm not going to support this motion, by the way, because I mean, fundamentally, I do not support livestock in the urban area. Pot-belly pigs were grandfathers, as you said, and we had great discussion about that, you know, back in 2012. And you know, they are no longer allowed and will no longer be allowed. So I'm just very, very concerned about the welfare of animals. And you know, from a council perspective, as a councillor from the rural area and farm country, I just, I'm really, really uncomfortable putting any kind of livestock or animal, you know, to be offered up under a pilot project. It just doesn't sit well with me, but that's just my opinion. So I won't be supporting the motion, but thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to any other questions from committee. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I'm one of those guys that grew up on a farm. And until we became exclusively dairy, we did have a chicken coop that had a number of chickens in it. And when I hear the discussion going on, reminds me of that movie Billy Crystal called City Slickers. And he took Norman home with him, which was a cow. Unfortunately, the calf grows up to be a pretty big animal, and it became a problem for him. But being very familiar with chickens, I can remember trying to catch them. They run up your back and peck your neck. But the smell of chicken manure is the worst smell. And I don't know how many urbanites know this, but hens don't pee. And the reason they don't is because it comes out in their manure. Therefore, it's very high in ammonia. And if you've ever been around a chicken farm and they're spreading chicken manure, it makes your eyes water. It makes me gag sometimes when you smell this. Now, that's part of living in a rural life, in a rural area, but it's not something that probably belongs in a neighborhood community. You know, chickens, the chicken farmers, we have lots of them in Ancaster. They tell me that chickens only lay for about 11 months, and then they go to the soup pot with Campbell's soup and uses to that effect. Because you know, the one delegate rightly said they slow down, but they eventually stop. And so when you have 4 hens and they stop laying after 2 years, what do? You go get 4 more, because then the other 4 stay as pets. And they go forth and multiply. You know, it sounds like the 2 delegations today are quite responsible owners, but some may not when it gets out there. And I spend way too much of my time in my community getting pulled into neighbor disputes. And I always try to just dump it off on Ken, say, bylaw, go enforce the rules. But they won't let you go. They're the constituents. They want you to take a side. And I just don't want to get into this debate. You know, I heard them say that they want the chickens to eat the ticks, which is great. But that means you're free-ranging them. And a lot of people like to have free-range chickens. In fact, they're marketed in grocery stores because they are free-range, so they'd wander around your backyard. But chickens do fly. They fly over fences. Chickens roost because they like to be up high, away from their predators, and they poop all over the neighbor's lawn furniture, brand new cushioned lawn furniture. And then look out, the war will start. And we'll get pulled into this, and we just got enough to do without getting pulled into that. You know, we're assuming that everybody who does this will, the coops will be well kept. But that's not necessarily the case. We see what some people do to their backyards with the don't cut grass and a lot of junk gathering out there. And next thing you know, we're going to have 30, you know, a number of chickens in a backyard, which are going to be flying around and be a problem. They do attract rodents for two reasons. Number one, they like chicken feed, mice. And so they'll come over to get into that feed to be able to have their meal, and then they tend to hide in the manure. And so you can get, and I've seen it in barns, a serious rodent problem, which could happen in an urban area, and that's not pleasant for neighbors to have that happen. So that's just some of the reasons I've always opposed this, because I have personal experience with it. I lived it for quite a while. And it's not an environment you want to have livestock in, is someone's backyard, because of the problems it'll cause. You know, they caught the feed the chickens. It's called egg maker. It's not cheap. And if you only have about 4 chickens, the food will probably cost more than the value of the eggs, because you can buy a dozen eggs for around $4 or $5. And the bag of chicken maker or egg maker runs about $15, and they go through it pretty quick. So those are some of the reasons. I just don't want to start this up. You know, pilots tend to grow. And if the wards 1 through 3 councillors want it in their areas only, but the fact that it's going in as a pilot generally means there'll be somebody else will be in different wards and asking for the same thing to happen. And I just don't want to arbitrate that. So I guess you can tell from my comments, I won't be supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. And for non-committee members, I have Councillor Nan, followed by Councillor Clark. Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through the chair, for the opportunity to speak to the motion, and thank you for Councillor Wilson for tabling it and Councillor Farr for seconding it. There are a couple of comments here, and I appreciate the conversation that's underfoot in terms of the issue and some of the personal experiences coming from our rural representatives around the table. So might come as a surprise, but I also have grown up understanding chickens quite well. I used to, in exchange for my time being not such a good kid, got to spend some time on a neighbor's farm in Merritt, and my job was to take care of the chickens. And so I'm familiar with what it is like on a farm with chickens. But I also have a brother who lives in an urban area in the interior of British Columbia who keeps a very clean coop, not very dissimilar from Heather Bonds here in Ward 3. And he keeps 6 chickens, and his sons take care of them. And similarly, he has I think they're called Rockport chickens or Rockport hens. I'm not sure exactly the name of the species, but not only are they beautiful, but they also produce for up to 7 years. And so my experience has been from an urban setting here in the ward that the smell issue that Councillor Ferguson was referring to, because we're not talking about the same quantity of animals that a farm would have, you're not dealing with the same quantity of the excrement. And plus, with highly cleaned and highly maintained coops, when I was there in the back of Heather Bond's backyard, I literally couldn't smell anything. And in fact, I smelled the wood chips more than I smelled anything else. That said, I did want to ask staff a couple of questions, and I'm mindful of the time and want to reserve it for those questions, and then I'll have some final comments afterwards as well, so I can come back a second time. So through you, Chair, to staff, Are staff aware of how many municipalities in Ontario currently permit urban hens?
Through the chair, no, although I see through your motion you said there's currently 8.
No, actually, that was 8 since the last time council did look at this issue. In total, there's over a dozen, if not more than that. Through you, Chair, to staff, are staff familiar with any of the regulations that the cities who have permitted urban hens have put in place in terms of the perceived complaints that have been identified here today and that were identified previously?
Through the chair, no, we aren't aware of the regulations because we haven't done the research in relation to it because currently urban hens are prohibited.
Okay, so I've done some of that research, and to help mitigate the potential negative effects associated with backyard hens, municipalities that allow the practice have the following regulations in common. All of them prohibit roosters. All of them limit the age of the first flock. All of them have a registration process that includes an annual review. They limit the number of hens to 4 per property. They require mandatory chicken enclosures, which meet all already defined construction standards. They provide educational materials and information on safe practices. So before you get permitted, you actually go through an education component with the city with all the best practices outlined to you. They prohibit the sale of eggs and manure. They restrict manure disposal only through municipal waste collection. They require proper disposal of deceased hens through a vet, and they regulate the disposal of spent fowl through either slaughterhouses and vets, and they also prohibit the slaughtering of hens in homes. So there has been a lot of evolution since this council began looking at this issue back in 2012 when Councillor Farr first brought it to the table, and then subsequently. In fact, in a Toronto Star article in February 2020, the City of Toronto is halfway through its 4-year pilot, and staff indicated in that article that none of the predicted blights have materialized. In fact, they were quoted to saying the predicted chorus of neighbor complaints was not a peep. And according to the City of Toronto's Animal Service Project Manager, it's quite possible that to have backyard hens in urban situations and have virtually no impact to their neighbors. There haven't been the same number of complaints about noise or unsanitary conditions in any of these locations when we have permitted the urban hens. And most importantly, now in 2020, in the middle of the largest health pandemic that we're facing in over 100 years, food security and access to nutrient-dense food has become more critical than ever. And this is where I think the differences between wards does matter, and why sometimes we do need to have very localized programs to meet the very localized needs. Ward 3 has the highest number of users, residents, who are accessing emergency food services. Ward 3 has the highest number of residents who are accessing food banks. Ward 3 also has the highest number of people living with the lowest amount of income in the entire city. Food security and food access is a serious concern, and this pandemic has only made the issue that much more. And in other municipalities, we have cities that are focusing on developing robust programs to help actually build food security by encouraging residents to share their backyard harvests with each other and support each other as neighbors to get through this. So I'm going to hold my comments there. I do have a few more points that I wanted to make sure that the rest of this committee is aware of, because for me, I think it's critical that we, 1, remain open-minded. 2, I appreciate that you all have taken a kick at this can a few times. But 3, it's really, really important that we share the information so that everybody is informed as council members prior to casting your ballot. And I really do appreciate your open-mindedness as we continue this discussion. Thank you. I'll come back on for a second time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I have an interesting perspective as an urban councillor who is now representing a large rural area as a part of his ward. I can't speak to why Toronto didn't have any complaints, but I can tell you that the chicken coops in my rural area are nothing like the chicken coops that this lady just presented. They are relatively old. They're not well maintained. The chickens get out and they go all over the place. And I'm dealing with complaints. So if you're saying that there's not going to be any complaints because they're going to be kept in the coops, it's been my experience that chickens can fly the coop. They do get out, they do get all over the place, and there are issues. And I learned from experience. I got to deal with the complaints and try to get the neighbors to be nice neighbors and work with each other, because the chickens are allowed to be grown in the rural area. So I still have concerns. I think that what Councillor Ferguson has stated is very accurate, and I think it's going to be a large issue down the road in terms of how you spread it beyond those pilot areas. I'd also like to know the cost, Mr. Chairman, of what the bylaw is going to have to do to hire more people to enforce on these coops. If we're having these tight of regulations, we don't have those tight regulations on anti-smoking, and we don't enforce anti-smoking. We have a whole bunch of bylaws in the city right now. I think the last count was 5,000, and a whole whack of them are not being enforced because we don't have the manpower. So my fear is that we're going to create chicken coops in a pilot and then not have the manpower to actually do the job, and there's going to be issues down the road. Obviously not issues for me because I'm not involved in the pilot, but there's still going to be complaints that this council are going to have to deal with. So I still have concerns, and I look forward to the debate as it unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. On first time, I still have Councillor Pearson. I think I saw you added to the list, and I'm going to add myself to the list, and then I'll come back to Councillor Nan for a second time. Oh, Councillor Johnson, you wish to speak as well? All right, I'll add you right after Councillor Pearson. Councillor Pearson?
Sorry, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too was not going to speak. My record speaks to my position on this on the previous votes, and I still cannot support it. I appreciate Councillor Nan's tremendous amount of work that has been done, but even setting this as a pilot project for wards 1, 2, and 3 doesn't preclude that it'll become citywide. I can tell you that I get complaints now of residents in my ward having chickens. And I appreciate Heather Bond's coop and the diligence that she takes in maintaining it, but there is absolutely no guarantee that that is going to be the standard that will be followed by anybody wishing to pursue the raising of chickens or hens in their backyard. I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to be very careful because I've also had a neighborhood issue on myself. And, you know, I can speak personally for myself in my own neighborhood. I've never had raccoons in my neighborhood, ever. This year, I have raccoons. And I can tell you, I only found out very recently that someone has chickens in my neighborhood. I don't want to say I could put 2 and 2 together, but it's rather strange that this has happened and they're in the vicinity of where these animals are being kept. So I don't know how you would control, because you can't control everybody to be as pristine as Heather is. And I'm certainly complimenting Heather on what she has. I know that these animals attract rodents, they attract mice, they attract rats, they attract snakes. And of course, they're going after the feed. They're going after the eggs. So I really have a problem with this, especially with the intensification of development that we have going on throughout the city, especially Ward 10. And I also have a good complement of areas that are very large properties in the residential neighborhoods. So I'm just going to put that out there that I still have concerns. I will always have concerns, and I don't want anyone to think, well, you just don't understand it as a citywide counselor, because I can tell you that back in the 60s, I had 2 pet chickens for a summer when I was growing up, because my father was going to work one early morning, and they got out of a crate on a on a truck going to obviously a slaughterhouse, and he was able to bring them home, and we had 2 pet chickens for the summer. So they weren't laying hens though. But I appreciate and understand but I cannot support this for the reasons that you know, it will create issues. And if we want to say that, you know, more bylaw enforcement, bylaw are up to their eyeballs in enforcing what we have now. If we want to keep adding more things to them, we better be darn ready to start adding more officers to our roster, because they're run off their feet. And I know, because it's taking longer and longer to get responses for bylaw issues currently in my ward. So I'm going to leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted on the record again that I will not support this again at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson? Oh, Councillor Johnson, I can't hear you. For real.
No, I'm only allowed to do that, and only allowed to do that to Councillor Wilson. First of all, I just wanted to put something on the record here. This is not urban versus rural councillors, folks, because every one of us have a ward that includes of us rural councillors that you would like to deem us. We all have towns, we all have villages, we all have urban centers. So it's not, we're just strictly rural. I have a real issue with pilot projects involving living things, as Councillor Partridge said earlier. Pilot projects are there for a reason. They're ideal because they are built in with an escape hatch. The escape hatch is to cancel it, which gives people a level of comfort when we want to do a pilot project, say for traffic calming or something that's doesn't involve living things. We always have that escape hatch, as we are right now on Queen Street, to pull that project back if we have to. Canceling a project involving pets is a disaster. I will remind you all of that nice lady who came up to our podium last year with a goose in her arms. That was her pet. She had several more at home. And right behind her was a list and a string of neighbors complaining about smell, odors, foul odors, and especially rodents. They have no idea how to get rid of all these rodents that have now emerged into their neighborhood. It really feels like Groundhog Day, to be honest with you. If you want to put this in, you better make sure you have a good relationship with your neighbors. And as Councillor Ferguson said, I've done my research. It's not cost effective. For the eggs, when you minus off the inoculations and the maintenance and the feed, the savings are next to nothing. So it says that the motion wants the staff to bring back a report. The staff already brought back a report. We dealt with it. And it was the ownership bylaw, animal ownership bylaw. My apologies. So brought back the report. And again, this is not a ward issue. This is a citywide issue, because once you've started in one, it's going to transparent into others. And right now, I can tell you I have 4 urban coops in my ward that I know of. 3 of them are getting complaints, and not because they're not allowed. They're getting complaints because they're unkempt, because there's odors, because the noise, and the vermin. So if all the people are not like Heather, if they were all like Heather, this would be a no-brainer. This would be an absolute walk in the park. But unfortunately, when you allow one coop in, you're allowing all the coops in, and all the coops are not maintained like that very nice lady Heather who was talking to us earlier. So I think you know, I'm going to remain consistent. I am not voting for this. I appreciate the work that the councillors are doing on behalf of their residents. But let's be fair, we wouldn't be here if we didn't hear that there was a complaint in the first place. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. And just from myself, a couple comments. Listening to the discussion and realizing the history that this has, not unlike licensing cats and some other contentious issues, it seems to be, it comes around every once in a while. The resident that did come to planning committee with her pet ducks, it was a constituent of mine. And, you know, it was a neighborhood complaint about her ducks that ended up having her to send her pets to a farm because she was no longer able to keep them because of our bylaw. And it was mainly about rodents in her coop and her attempts to deal with rats, putting out rat poison, and then the neighbor's dogs getting into the rat poison. So definitely can be a serious issue in the urban area if they're not cared for properly. And you know, totally recognize that. Having said that, it's not unlike any neighbor disputes between cats and dogs, and cats pooping in my garden and the dogs barking all the time and they don't clean up the dog's feces, and there's raccoons in the dog food because my neighbor puts out, you know, bowls of dog food all the time. So these kinds of neighbor to neighbor conflicts are ongoing all the time about everything, and we all receive them. You know, this season, receiving complaints about your neighbor's leaves falling on your side of the fence, that kind of thing. So I'm cognizant of the issues that it can raise, but I based on the experiences in the other municipalities, it just does not seem to manifest to an actual problem based on real world evidence. Recognizing that the petition that the resident had at 1,500 names, I mean, there is a hell of a lot of hay made about a petition with 700 names for another issue, and this petition has double that. And you know, that's recognizing that there is a significant desire for this in our city. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about the food security issue, because while this has gone through several iterations through council, I think the food security issue is a new part to this. And I don't think that you can compare what's being proposed here to factory farming. I mean, I also worked in a chicken farm, catching chickens by the legs, holding them up, you know, taking them to collecting them for slaughter. I worked in a chicken barn, washing and sorting eggs. And yeah, a factory chicken farm is absolutely horrible. No question about it. It stinks like to high heaven. It's a nasty place that you don't want to be. But that's not what's being proposed here. It's totally different. And on the food security side, thinking back to March and April, just from my personal perspective, there is real questions about where we were going to get our food. Would I still be able to go to the grocery store to get what I normally get? Would we still be importing fruits and vegetables from the US? Like these were real food security issues. And, you know, in those, some of those areas in wards 1, 2, and 3, I don't think that we can understate the importance of food security. And the people that I know that have chicken coops right now out in the rural areas, they feed their chickens kitchen scraps. So they're not going out and buying factory farm feed for their chickens. They're feeding them just whatever they eat. And it is, everybody I know that has a chicken coop is giving away the chicken eggs constantly because they can't possibly use as many as their hens produce. So, you know, I really don't see any downside to this as a pilot. You know, let's try it out. Let's see if it actually is a problem in Hamilton. With, you know, 10 hen keepers in 3 wards, there's really no downside to that. I understand the concern about this being a pilot with live animals, but I mean, realistically, if we are on one hand treating them as livestock, at the end of the pilot, if it doesn't work out, you make soup. So again, I just don't see the resistance to this. It's anyway. I think you see my point here. Let's try it, see what happens, and if it doesn't work out, then we try something different. But I appreciate committee's time. Okay, Councillor Wilson, and then I'll go to Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak to the issue of food security or the lack thereof. The impact of COVID on the lives of people is not just limited to the direct threat of a virus that it imposes on their health. It extends to their food security through the disruptions that we've been seeing or feared we would see through our local food systems. And so I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about the lonely egg. right? One egg has 7 grams of high quality protein, along with iron, vitamins, and minerals. And Canada's Food Guide considers eggs to be a valuable source of high quality protein. So who do we know that needs protein the most? It's women who are pregnant, and it is small children. So let's talk for a minute about child and brain development. We know that there's 3 factors that have a profound impact on early brain development: toxic stress and inflammation, whether the child is surrounded by strong social support, then bylaw enforcement. Protein and protein energy restrictions result in smaller brains, fewer neurons, and small growth factors overall that impact that child as they become an adult. So I know there has been, and I am no doubt, I don't doubt the sincerity of the comments about this is not an urban and this is not a rural issue, but there are some stark differences between rural and urban in this community. Low-income families. In Ward 1, 24.5%. Ward 2, 47%, and Ward 3, 41.3% of residents in those wards are defined as low-income families. Compare that to Ward 15, 6.2%. The percentage of kindergarten students deemed vulnerable is highest in Ward 3, 32%, and it's lowest in Ward 15 at 9.4%. Again, brain development, kids going to school hungry, not able to retain, sit still, participate fully. And in 2016, Hamilton City Council endorsed a 10-year food strategy with 4 overarching goals. And the first goal, support food-friendly neighborhoods to improve access to healthy food for all residents. And number 4, advocate for a healthy, sustainable, and just food system. A lot of the concerns that have been raised date from pens, perhaps, or coops rather, that are not regulated. And I think there have been way more questions asked than answered. And I think asking staff to go ahead and identify and work with not just 8, but over a dozen municipalities that have gone down this road. Certainly Hamilton's exceptionalism does not extend that far, that we don't have something to learn from those who are enabling this for their residents and those residents who want it. And I think the example of Toronto's pilot was referenced halfway through, no registered problems. Because of the strict conditions, the education, and the notion of hens flying, my understanding is just like parrots, they clip their wings so that they can't go over the neighbor's fence. So for a pilot, I think there are genuinely good questions that have been asked. I would appreciate the opportunity to receive the information from staff and recognizing the real issue of the opportunity during this time and for all times for neighbors to share and help each other out, particularly in those neighborhoods where a little bit of help is needed the most. Thank you. I will be obviously supporting the motion.
The last word.
Thank you, through the chair. You know, if I can appeal to the council members on this committee, the reality of this motion is seeking information. And one of the things that we've been learning over the last 2 years is serving together is our desire to make sure that we are making policy decisions that are informed by facts and not informed on assumptions or opinions. The reality of the day is that since 2012, the situation and landscape has shifted significantly from municipality after municipality here in Ontario that have amended their bylaws, that have learned from each other, that have created very strict protocols to enable a very few number of urban hens in designated areas in urban parts of their cities. So to make a decision that's based on assumptions or based on fear of complaints versus on facts, I think is something that we really need to stay open to as a council. What is the standard we're putting forward in the policy decisions that we're making? And if study after study and pilot program after pilot program is indicating very clear, and whether you want to take my word for it or not, that's the whole point of asking for this motion, is to bring back a non-political, very informed, neutral research coming from our staff that can help us understand what is the evaluative framework that has enabled those municipalities to succeed. What is the winning formula that helps ensure that there aren't the conditions or issues that have been the basis of assumption of complaints, noise, odor, etc.? How do we make sure that when we're talking about Miss Bond's coop, that we're not talking about it as an exceptional coop, but we're talking about it as the standard of coops? We have the ability as a municipality to set that standard. We have the ability as a municipality to enable residents to succeed if they participate in this program. We also have the ability to make sure that we're doing this in a way that manages our resources. And by that, I mean our staff resources. So if 10 hens in 1, 2, and 3 are too many, let's knock that back down to 5 and make sure that it's a manageable number. And let's hear back from our staff in terms of what would make it feasible and produce the best outcomes for us to learn from in order to enhance the program. And for those of my colleagues who are afraid that a pilot then means that we're going to expand it, if that's your concern, I'd be happy to amend this motion to make it really restrictive to 1, 2, and 3 for the period of the pilot, to ensure that the pilot is one that is going to enhance the program for wards 1, 2, and 3. If fundamentally at the end of the day, we're talking about enabling 3 urban wards who have true population outcomes that we are obligated to meet, to say that if this has been the circumstances of our residents in this ward, we have an obligation as residents, as councillors, to ensure that those outcomes are changing. And the decisions that we make around these committees and the decisions we make around this council is what enables us ward councillors to produce those outcomes for our residents. And I appeal to your goodwill. I appeal to your open-mindedness. I appeal to your ability to equally value informed decision making. And I just want to stress again that this is a pilot. This is an opportunity. This motion is actually only requesting information. We have passed, I don't know how many feasibility reviews and information report requests as a council previously. And quite frankly, the information's already there. There's a source document that's already been put out on urban hen keeping that links all of the current test locations across every municipality in Ontario. I don't believe it would take a lot of work, but I would like to receive that information back, and I appeal to the will of this committee and then at council to allow us as council members to make an informed decision at this time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers on this issue, so the motion to request information regarding the Urban Hen Backyard Pilot Program moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Councillor Pearson, are you able to vote? Thumbs down from Councillor Pearson. and that is defeated 3-5. Okay, so where were we in the agenda? Back to page 14. Okay. So for the following items, the public has been advised of how to pre-register to be a virtual delegate at the public meetings on today's agenda, and no members of the public have to speak at this meeting. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be, oh no, there's no members of the public, so I don't need to read all that, do I? I will still have to read that. Okay, this is to the general public, members of the general public. In accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment applications before us today, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So on item 7.2 is the application to amend the Urban Hamilton official plan and Glanbrook zoning bylaw number 464 for lands located at 1912 Rymel Road East, Glanbrook, and Ward 9. Does the committee wish to see the staff presentation? Not seeing any desire to see the staff presentation? Nope. So I need a mover. Oh, hang on a sec here. Yes, mover and a seconder to waive the staff presentation. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor of waiving the staff presentation? Councillor Farr, are you still in the meeting? I don't see Councillor Farr. Councillor Pearson, you're in agreement to waive the staff presentation? Yes? Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark indicated and Councillor Johnson's indicated as well. So do you wish to, well, we're going to go to the planning consultants. So we have Glenn Wellings from Wellings Planning Consultants in attendance. Glenn?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, and city staff. Hope everybody is doing well. Mr. Chairman, I am the planning consultant for the applicant in this case, and I do have a couple of housekeeping matters to attend to that I'd like to address with committee. And just a few comments. The staff report, we are in full agreement with the staff report. We've worked hard to get to this point with the assistance of Melanie Schneider and Councillor Clark. And I'm glad Councillor Clark could join us today. But it's been a very constructive public engagement, and it really is a good fit for this property in the context of the surrounding area and being on a fairly major transportation corridor. But Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of issues with the draft zoning bylaw that I'd like to address with committee this morning. First of all, there is, and first of all, I have corresponded with Ms. Schneider on these comments, so she's aware that they're coming forward. The draft zoning bylaw and the recommendations of the report includes a holding provision, and that holding provision was included due to outstanding comments from transportation planning. We have since received those comments, and I can advise committee that transportation planning is now satisfied with the proposal. So I would ask the committee to remove the recommendation dealing with the holding provision. It's simply no longer necessary. And the second issue I want to address on the draft zoning bylaw is the issue of underground parking. The proposal has always been to have a 0 lot line setback for the underground parking. And this unfortunately was not captured in the draft zoning bylaw. So I've spoken with Ms. Snyder on the issue and corresponded. I don't think we ever spoke. It was email. Staff's primary concern, and I share this concern, is that there is sufficient soil depth for the appropriate planting and landscaping that's been envisioned for this property. I have assured city staff through consultation with the architect DPAI, as well as the landscape architect Adesso Design, that there is sufficient soil depth available for a fairly extensive planting program. And Councillor Clark will recall that there was a visual impact study with a detailed landscape plan that was provided to the residents. That can be achieved with a 0 lot line setback for the underground parking. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to thank planning staff for bringing this matter forward, and I can advise committee that the site plan application is expected over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and our client's fairly anxious to move forward with this project. So thank you very much for listening. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And I heard you state that you are in support of the staff report. Can you just reconfirm?
Yes, sir. Yeah, subject to the modifications on the holding provision and the housekeeping modification on the underground parking. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got the 2 concerns noted. We're really trying to avoid last minute concerns being brought forward straight to planning committee because it really puts this committee at a disadvantage. But we'll leave that up to committee how to deal with those. Are there any questions from committee to Mr. Wellings? Councillor Johnson? No? Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor to receive the delegation? Thank you. That's carried. And then I need a mover and receive the written submission. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? And then I need a mover and a seconder to close the public meeting. Councillor Johnson? Moved by Councillor Johnson, or did you want to speak? Sorry, I can't hear you.
My apologies. Just a quick question. I would just like to ask staff before we approve everything as a whole, and I don't know what time, when you want me to ask that question, and it's just process only.
Okay, we'll close the public meeting and then we'll get to the report.
I'll move that, sir.
Okay, thank you. So to close the public meeting, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Partridge. Councillor Partridge, did you wish to? No, okay. All in favor? Okay, so we're on to the staff report. Put it on the floor. I need a mover and seconder regarding the staff report to approve the application with an amendment that the public submissions received on this matter, A, did not affect the decision. That's the correct one, right? Okay, so mover and seconder to put this on the floor, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. And any discussion on the staff recommendation? Councillor Johnson. And then I'll come to Councillor Clark.
Thank you. And I defer to Councillor Clark, obviously. This is now his word. This was my word when it first came on the docket. My question is, when I look at Appendix G, I see everyone's name, their address, their phone numbers, and I have consistently asked this in staff reports why we redact all the personal information, but in this case we did not. Because I'm always interested when I see petitions or I see letters, I want to know whether or not they're really coming from the area residents or did somebody from Parry Sound write it. So can somebody please answer why we're allowing all the personal information in Appendix G, but nowhere else have I seen this in probably the last year and a half?
Who's available to answer that?
Through the chair to the committee member, this is
Hi,
Melanie
Melanie.
Schneider with the planner with the City of Hamilton. Appendix G is actually the sign-in sheet for the open house that was held by Glenn Welling's office. In addition to that, it's just confirming who attended that open house. It's not necessarily a petition.
No, and I understand that. Thanks, Melanie. But we've always redacted personal information, regardless where it came from. We've had people go around to do petitions. We've had open houses before, and all the personal information was redacted, much to my chagrin, because that's something I really look to see whether or not these are people that are, you know, coming from up north, or are they actually people who live in the immediate area that have a concern and it impacts on them, good or bad. So I just want to put that out there, folks. We've got to be consistent here, in my opinion. And I refer now to Councillor Clark. Thank you. I just wanted to put that on for the record.
Yep.
Councillor Johnson, it's Lisa Kelsey here. The planning notices that go out, there is a section that indicates that if people want their private information specifically removed, that they have to clearly indicate that. So that may explain some when it comes to written submissions. But yeah, and that's like one portion. But anyways, I'm not going to belabor that. I just wanted to point this out because this is the first time I've seen this in a long, long time. And I appreciate it, actually. I think that it adds more credibility to the signatures. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. While it may bring about more credibility, it doesn't comply with MFIPA, and the addresses, phone numbers, and emails should have been redacted from that list. Once it's on a document that we're putting out, we're responsible for it. So I'd appreciate it if the clerks could ensure that they redact addresses, phone numbers, and emails on this document before it becomes the final part of the record on our website. I have a number of questions, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I'm just trying to open up my pictures. Give me 1 second here. So let's start with, it would be Appendix E. And I think it was Melanie, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the issues that were raised by the residents, and there were 7 residents that raised concerns at the public meeting, and then 2 have subsequently filed written objections, as I understand it, was privacy. So when I'm looking at this chart, how have we mitigated some of the concerns about privacy when I'm looking at the design of the building in relationship to the neighborhood that is now going to be adjoining?
Through the chair to the councillor, I'll actually bring up my presentation that I had prepared for this because I do have a slide that I think will address those overlook concerns that were identified in the public consultation. If I can just get my share my screen.
Would that be slide 4?
It's near the end of the presentation.
Yep.
So this is slide 20. So from current slide. So this image is from the visual impact assessment that Glenn Wellings mentioned earlier. This image is a rendering from the 4th floor of the proposed building. And as a reminder, this is a proposed 5-story. So this is from the theoretical 4th floor, looking towards the residential subdivision to the southwest. And here we do have a few properties that were identified being closest to the proposed development.
Correct.
As part of the mitigation measures, the applicant is proposing some extensive vegetation. So these trees that are shown in this image here are proposed on site, and as part of the discussions for this application, we were discussing using mature trees or trees that would be big enough to provide this shielding towards the neighborhood to the southwest. So that's the main mitigation measure that we incorporated into the site design.
Now that was, Mr. Chairman, the mitigation measure which was proposed at the public meeting. Was there a response from any of the residents about that? What this looks like? Are they happy with that?
Through the chair to the councillor, we did not receive any responses, though Glenn Welling's office did reach out to the people that attended the open house to get feedback, and we did not receive a response in this regard.
Thank you. In your presentation, and I don't know what slide number it is, I think it's the fourth one. Oh, it's number 3. It says on the bottom where you've got the Hamilton logo. It has the aerial view of the property from the looking down, straight down at it. Do you have it?
Yes. Through the chair, this image is the aerial view of the subject lands.
Okay, so when I'm looking at this property, the yellow box is the subject lands. Directly to the east is a child care center, early learning program. Directly to the west is a stormwater management pond, which, as you can see in this photo, is rather extensive. One of the issues that the residents along the southern portion and the eastern portion have complained about is drainage. Did that come up in the discussions with the residents?
Through the chair to the councillor, the drainage, from what I recall at the open house, wasn't a big discussion item. From what I recall through reaching out to the public was that the drainage concerns were a result of existing situations. So this proposed development does need to follow the City of Hamilton engineering guidelines, which does require that all stormwater management be managed on site, that there be no flooding of adjacent lands. So that will have to be detailed and addressed through the site plan application to ensure that there is no drainage onto adjacent properties or no flooding.
So is anyone present, Mr. Chairman, from Growth Management, like Tony Sergi?
I can't see the meeting right now, but Tony, I'm hearing Tony is in the meeting.
My apologies, trying to find the mute button. Tony Sergi, Director of Growth Management.
Good morning, Mr. Sergi. How are you, sir?
It's just a beautiful day. The sun is out finally.
It's a beautiful day in our neighborhood. As you know, there's been issues with drainage and complaints about drainage along the southern part of this property. Have we resolved it, and will we be exasperating it by adding this new development on this subject property?
Through the chair to the councillor, I'm not sure whether the current status is about the drainage complaints on that piece of it, but when we look at this plan, we'll make sure that the abutting south line is not being impacted. The outlet, I believe, is along the Rymal Road corridor. It's not going to be sheet flowing into the pond itself. It has to be managed on site. There's no spillage that's supposed to be occurring, and they should not be blocking any drainage that is actually getting off the site, both from the west and from the south, if that's the case. So at site plan, we will actually ensure that the drainage doesn't have any adverse impacts, and it's at the right elevation, not to spill over.
Thank you. Another question for, I think it would be Mr. Sergi. The property is proposing a underground parking lot. I can't recall how many levels it is. The property directly north of here is the Aramosa Karst and the feeder lands. And the large concern about that ANSI is the continuous flow of the water underground. So has there been any geotechnical studies to verify that by putting that underground parking lot in, it's not going to impede or redirect the flow of underground water?
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I can't recall what was provided at the time of this development, but when ROPA 9 proceeded at the time, I don't believe this one had any conduit that was connecting to that Hermosa karst at that point. I can't remember exactly where the conduits were placed, but I would have to look at that and get back to you with the details on that. I would assume based on the current design, it would need to be basically a watertight design to avoid any impacts to the new building and to ensure it doesn't impact any migration along the sides either. I would have to look at the details for you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can assist Tony Sergi with, on page 23 of the report, it notes that under the Hamilton Conservation Authority comments, that a karst assessment and a geotechnical report have been provided, which indicates that the lands can be developed without having an impact on the associated natural heritage system. And as Mr. Sergi indicated, throughout the site plan stage, we will be ensuring that the recommendations and the requirements of both of that karst assessment and the geotechnical report are reviewed and further implemented through the site plan process to make sure that the development at the site plan stage is consistent with the recommendations and the information contained in those two previous reports that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interjection, Mr. Robichaud. That was very helpful. So I can paraphrase that the Hamilton Conservation Authority has signed off on this development, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct, and that we will be circulating the Hamilton Conservation Authority at the site plan stage to ensure, and that they any necessary permits. Yes, the HCA has also identified that they must issue a permit, as the HCA is the governing body dealing with karst features. So until such time as the HCA is satisfied, after consulting with the city, the development cannot proceed as it relates to those natural heritage matters. Thank you.
Thank you. While I have you, Mr. Robichaud, can you address the discussion that Mr. Welling raised with regards to a holding provision that he's trying to have removed, and do you feel comfortable with that request?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes. Our transportation planning staff have advised that the holding provision is no longer required, and they have no objection with the request that Mr. Wellings has made to remove the holding provision for that transportation study, since it would now be redundant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With regards to some of the concerns that residents raised about the additional traffic, Rymel Road is being widened, and now we're not at Fletcher yet. When is this building expected to be occupied? I'm trying to compare the time of when actual tenants would be in the building versus the actual final widening of the road.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would anticipate, given the requirements to go through the site planning process, building permit review, and then actual construction, it would be no sooner than 24 months before occupancy would occur. It really depends on the applicant's timeframes on how aggressive they are, but usually a building of this size, either probably 24 to 36 months before occupancy would occur. Full occupancy would occur. They may have phased occupancy depending on how the construction proceeds, but I don't anticipate anything happening for at least 24 months from an occupancy perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very good to know, given that the widening of the road has been going very well, given all the good weather that we've had, and it seems to be on target for the opening in 2021. The last question was with regards to an increase in crime. One of the residents had raised a concern that this 5-story building could attract an increase in crime. Have we experienced anything like that when we put in a medium-sized residential complex into a community, that we've seen an increase in crime as a result?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the board councillor, I am not aware of any reports or statistical information that would suggest that there is a linkage between a mid-rise building and crime. And in fact, it's usually the opposite, where you have a vacant lot or a vacant building that you end up getting undesirable social behavior happening. But by actually developing this site, it would eliminate that potential. So I would suggest that that concern is misplaced from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can speak to the committee as a whole there, this application has been going through this process through a bit of time. It started with Councillor Johnson and then came to me. There's been a number of public meetings and discussions with the local residents. Over time, we have been able to mitigate the vast majority of the objections. I think we're down to 2 written comments with concerns. I'm comfortable that the answers that I've been provided, and upon reading the documentation, that it's not going to have the impact on the community that the residents are concerned about. So I can support this going forward, given that it is on Rymal Road, which is one of our transit corridors that we will see, I would suggest likely much higher intensity than just this 5-story building in the near future, right along Rymal Road, given that it is a traffic corridor. But I support this application, and I'd encourage my colleagues to support it also. I thank the residents for participating in the civic engagement. It really does help me a great deal in asking probative questions that can resolve the issues that they have concerns about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson?
Yep, thank you. My speaker button's not working. Thank you, Councillor Clark, and I totally agree. I have been arguing all along that Rymal needs to be higher density instead of just townhouses when it's a major corridor. I'd be willing to move this at the appropriate time. Councillor Danko.
Thank you. So I think we had Councillor Johnson as the mover. I can't remember who was the seconder. Councillor Pearson, maybe Councillor Partridge? Who did I have originally? Wilson. Okay, so we have the staff report to approve the application with an amendment that the public submissions received did not affect the decision. Yeah, so I'm going to ask committee about the 2 issues raised by the planning consultant. The first would be the holding provision, and I think we heard from Mr. Robichaud that it wasn't required. And the second is the underground parking. Does committee wish to amend either of those 2? Not seeing any desire from committee. Okay. So then we are going to approve the application as is. So I'm going to call a vote on that then. Yes. So all in favor of a There we go.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you and the councillors for their time today.
Thank you for attending, Councillor Clark. It's always nice to have the ward councillor in attendance. It makes this process much easier instead of us having to speak on your behalf. So appreciate your attendance. So finally, I need a mover and a seconder to approve the report recommendations as amended. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So it is lunchtime. I'd rather not have a complete break right now, but maybe 15 minutes to grab a coffee, go to the washroom, and then we'll come back for the next application. Does that sound okay with committee? Councillor Johnson?
Sorry, I believe the next one is for 8475 English Church Road. I believe the applicant is going to ask for it to be tabled. Do you want to do that first before we take a break? So
yeah, we can do that.
Maybe just go right to the applicant. If not, then we can do it as you planned.
Well, I got to go through my my roadmap here, but if that's the intention, it's not going to take too long. So, okay, so on 7.3, which is an application for the Rural Hamilton Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for lands located at 8475 English Church Road East, Glanbrook, PED 18077 in Ward 11. Does the committee wish to see the staff presentation?
No, I think, sorry, Councillor Danko, I believe they're asking for this to be tabled in its entirety. So can we just ask the applicant so that way we don't have to deal with this item at this time?
Yeah, I'm still going to go through though the just to waive this. Okay. So just hang on a sec, bear with me for a minute. So there's nothing on the floor right now.
Give me.
So, Councillor Johnson,
yes,
if you want to put a motion on the floor to defer this, then we can open up for questions to staff. Is that
okay? You know what? If I didn't want to complicate this, I was trying to make it easier for everyone. Ed, thumbs up. Do you wanted to table this for the next November 20th meeting? So
yes.
Can we just move this whole entire thing to November 20th meeting? No questions because we're deferring it.
That's correct. Yes, that'd be helpful.
Thank you. So, Councillor Danko, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I think we still want to ask staff though, just if they have any concerns with tabling this.
Okay.
Okay. Jason or Steve?
Through the chair to the councillor, it's Anita Fayback. Can you hear me?
Anita? Yes, I can, Anita.
Good afternoon. Anita Fayback, Manager of Development Planning, Heritage and Design. We have no concerns with the tabling. We just wanted to make sure that we had a definitive return date, so November 20th is acceptable.
Okay, perfect. So we got moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by myself to table this item to the November 20th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting.
Thank you. And this just helps the applicant now. So if we're going for our break, then he doesn't have to wait around either.
Oh, we don't need to go for a break now.
Okay.
we can just soldier on. So,
okay, thank you. And thank you, Ed. We'll see you on Friday.
Councillor Pearson? You're supportive? Yep. Where am I going here? Skip forward to page 22. So we've gone through motions. We've already voted on that one. So notice the motion. This is a demolition permit for 1355, 1359, and 1375 Upper James, and 16, 24, 34, 40, and 48 Stone Church Road East. And I gotta pass the chair over to, I think Councillor Johnson is the second vice chair. I'm gonna pass the chair to you, Councillor Johnson. Go ahead. And then I need a motion to waive the rules on this, as it is time sensitive. We're moving into the winter season. Councillor Pearson? Sorry, I'll let you. Sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor Johnson.
We have a mover and a seconder. Go ahead. Councillor Pearson is seconding it.
To waive the rules, yes.
Yes, to waive the rules.
So
all those in favor, electronic vote, please. And someone's going to have to verbally tell me the outcome. If you're not able to electronically vote, please put your thumbs up or down.
That's carried.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Councillor Danko, move your motion.
So this is moved by myself, seconded by, somebody wants to help me out here. Councillor Partridge.
Oh, Partridge, thank you. I'll do that.
Sorry.
Okay, what else do you want? Go ahead.
So just real quick, these are some houses that are left over on these properties. All these properties have been amalgamated into one development parcel. The zoning has already been approved by this committee, and it's currently in the site plan application process. And there's been quite a bit of activity there with break and enters and people, squatting in these homes, and there's a risk of fire. They've already been disconnected from electrical and everything for years, and the developer is just asking for permission to demolish those structures that are still existing here to remove the safety risk and to just get ahead of his eventual development of this property. So that's it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, any questions? I think people will remember this is similar to Councillor Pearson's motions last week for the same reasons. Seeing none, electronic vote, please, Lisa. And I'm going to turn the floor back over to you, sir, because I'm sure it's not a problem. I haven't seen any concerns. Go ahead.
Councillor Ferguson, got yours. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I copied Councillor Pearson's motion. Okay. Any other notices of motion? Seeing none. So on to our general information. We have a general manager's update. Jason, is there any update for committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just very quickly, Council at your last meeting had directed us to release for consultation our discussion paper and proposed zoning standards for secondary dwelling units. That's the basement apartments, laneway houses, and so on. So that information has now been launched on the Engage Hamilton website. All the discussion papers and backgrounders are up there. There is an online survey that has been posted, and we do have 2 virtual town halls coming up on November 12th and 16th. The details of that still TBD, but that engagement and consultation has begun. So if you have any constituents who are interested in reviewing and commenting on that, it is all up on Engage Hamilton. Thank you.
Any questions for the general manager? Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's not a question, but Jason, thank you, because you just tweaked me as a reminder. I just wanted to mention to staff or to the committee members, I'm not sure if you've read the email come across, but we have a staff person on our planning staff and heritage, Alyssa Golden, who is the recipient of the Carlos Venton Award for Municipal Heritage and Leadership that was sponsored by the Venton Group, VG Architects. And she, along with 4 other citizens or staff people in different communities, also won. But I want to congratulate Alyssa. She's always been a pleasure to work with over the years on Heritage Committee. And she was recognized for her commitment to municipal heritage in the city of Hamilton and her dedicated work to streamline and improve the city's ability to conserve its heritage. And I can attest to that. Because she's worked very closely with me with some properties in my own ward and assisting, allaying residents' concerns of what designation means and et cetera. So I too want to extend my congratulations to Alyssa and for all the hard work she's done. So thank you. I just want my colleagues to know that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll pass that on to her.
Any other questions for General Manager Thorne? Not seeing any. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the general manager's update. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Thank you. And that's it. So I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? I only brought a granola bar today, so everything's working out. Everything's coming up Millhouse.